Prostrations to the self, shining within everyone. Ramana, who is the self, shining within everyone. Prostrations to that self, manifest as Ramana. Prostrations to that self, manifest as the teachings of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, on which we will be dwelling by the very grace of that self. Ramanaya, Ramanaya, Ramanaya Namo. Ramanaya, Ramanaya, Ramanaya Namo. Ramanaya Namavemba Shivajnana Guruve Bhavadasegala Aliva Shri Kalpataruve Ramanaya 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 Namo. Ramanaya 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 Namo. We are often dwelling on the teachings of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. We sometimes dwell also on the life of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, and the two are one indivisible unit. But it is rarely that we look upon Bhagavan Ramana as a healer, as a doctor who heals. We would see him as a teacher, but do we see him as a doctor? So this thought was inspired by two things. One is a nama in Ramana Ashtothara Shatanamavali. This is 108 names on Bhagavan Ramana. It's been composed by one Vishwanatha Swamy, who had dedicated his life to Bhagavan Ramana. He spent, after his early or late teens, he came to stay with Bhagavan and stayed with him for the rest of his life, completely dedicating himself to the practice of the Ramana way. And thereafter also, he was available at Sri Ramana Ashramam to guide the seekers of truth on the Ramana path. And he has composed this 108 names. It is called the Ramana Ashtothara Shatanamavali. And in that, one of the names is Om Bhavaroga Bhishak Varaya Namaha. Bhishak means doctor, one who gives medicines, the appropriate medicines. So Vishwanatha Swamy here hails him as a doctor. What kind of a doctor? A doctor who cures the malady, the illness called Bhava. Bhavaroga Bhishak. He is the doctor to destroy or cure the illness, the great illness which is called Bhava. What that illness is, we will look upon it little in detail as we go on. But suffice to say that it means becoming. Bhava means to become something. The disease of having become something. We have become whomsoever we are at this moment. And this is seen to be a disease. And Ramana is said to be the doctor. What kind of a doctor is he? Bhishak Varaha. Bhavaroga Bhishak Varaha. He is a doctor par excellence. He is the greatest doctor. Bhishak Vara. Okay, so such a great doctor he is. This Nama of Bhagavan Ramana also resonated with a talk given in one of our very early seminars of Ramana Maharshi Centre for Learning by Professor S.K. Ramachandra Rao, a great Vedantin. And I would like to begin by reading out from his talk. So, he says there are two possible approaches to the Maharshi. One, the approach of the intellectually alert man, one who wants to know, one who is intellectually restive, one who has gone to the philosophies east and west, old and new, and not found a solution. He goes to Bhagavan Ramana as a sort of questioner, seeking an answer to some of the deep doubts that are there within him. And he finds an answer in Ramana's teachings. So he's referring to people like Paul Brunton and many, many other seekers of truth who went to Bhagavan Ramana, including Ganapati Muni, all of Ganapati Muni's, many of Ganapati Muni's disciples, Gambiram Sheshayar, Satyamangalam Venkatra, Shiva Prakasham Pillai, Muruganath Swamy himself to a great extent, so many, Sadhu Natanananda, many seekers went to Bhagavan to get their spiritual doubts cleared. Some went who were scholars in Vedanta. Even the then pontiff of the Jyotirmat, he had some doubt which he wanted to get clarified. He had read so many Shastras, and then he came to Bhagavan's presence and he got that doubt clarified through the Anubhava of Bhagavan. So that is one kind of approach to Bhagavan, says S.K. Ramachandra Rao. Then he says, the other approach, which I consider equally valid, is Ramana as a healer. Ramana as a healer. It is not everyone that is intellectually rested. Some are emotionally tense, emotionally restive, and emotionally ill. Such people also went to Bhagavan Ramana. And what did they find in him? He was the healer of the broken hearts. He healed them. This bishop, doctor, is germane to every saint. The natural urge for man is to seek some solace, to seek some comfort, because the mind-spirit disharmony is very basic to human existence. The mind-spirit disharmony is very basic to human existence. Why do we actually come to the spiritual path? What is it that makes us seek something which is beyond the boundaries of our daily existence? Because many of us who are gathered here are seekers. We are seekers of truth. Whether we are meditating on science, or even the greatest of scientists are seekers of truth. In a poem by Tennyson it's called Ulysses, the poet says that the dream of Ulysses, he completes the poem by saying, to seek knowledge beyond the farthest reach of human endeavor. To keep on seeking knowledge. He says he wants to keep on seeking knowledge. To keep on going beyond the horizon in search of knowledge. So there is something called a jijnasa in the human heart. In many human hearts, there is a seeking. There is a seeking. But then there is also a seeking in many of us, a seeking to transcend the suffering that is our lot. Something in us says that there is sorrow in our present condition. There is some sorrow in our present condition. And that is why Bhagavan Ramana, in his Upadesha to Shiva Prakasham Pillai, in the famous work Who Am I, he says every living being is seeking happiness. Every living being is seeking happiness. Why should somebody seek happiness if happiness is already available with them? Would any of us be crazy enough to seek something which belongs to us, which is already available with us in plenty? We wouldn't do that. We would only seek something which is not available to us. Or even though it is available to us, we are not aware that it is available. Suppose there are the famous Vedantic examples of the Kasturi Mriga, which has the Kasturi deer, which has the scent of the Kasturi, the scent is coming from, the fragrance is coming from its navel. And it is not able to discern that the fragrance is coming from its navel, and so it searches everywhere in the forest for that scent, constantly thinking it is somewhere in the air. But because it is not able to discern that it is having. And then, of course, there's the famous example of the Kantabharana, of wearing a necklace and searching for it. We often wear, those of us who wear spectacles continuously, for us, it sometimes becomes so much a part of us that even while wearing it, we might be searching for it. We will be wondering, where do I keep my pair of spectacles? So, not being able to discern. But even when we are not able to discern it, Bhagavan says, supposing a lady has forgotten that she's wearing a very, very precious necklace and she's searching for it, and ultimately when she's told that it is round her neck, then a friend comes to her and asks her, did you find your necklace? She says, I found it. She doesn't say, I never lost it. She says, I found it. Because there is a sense of having lost something, even though you may have it. So when you have a sense of loss, that is when one seeks. If one does not have a sense of loss, one will not seek. So why is it that we seek happiness? It is because we do not feel or do not experience that happiness which we are seeking, that quality of happiness which we are seeking, or that sustenance of happiness which we are seeking. This is what we are seeking. So every living being, Bhagavan says, is searching for happiness. So if we are searching for happiness and we are not experiencing happiness, what is it that we are experiencing then? We are experiencing some kind of a sorrow. We are experiencing some kind of a lack. There is, most of us, there is a lack. If there is no lack, there will be no seeking. When there is fullness, there will be no seeking whatsoever. If even one single thought arises in us, especially if any desire arises in us, it is very obvious. A desire arises because I am not full. A desire arises because I am not full. Bhagavan's younger brother, Niranjanananda Swamy, he had also taken sannyasa later in life. But he had a son before the sannyasa, and that son went on to become the president of Sri Ramana Ashramam. And his wife, Nagalakshmi, he was also a family man, he was wedded, and his wife, Nagalakshmi, both of them were greatly devoted to Bhagavan Ramana. In one instance, it happened that suddenly a packet was received at Sri Ramana Ashramam, a packet of 2 saris, 2 very beautiful saris. And all packets received at Sri Ramana Ashramam, all the post received at Sri Ramana Ashramam would first be shown to Bhagavan. So Bhagavan Ramana was shown this post and he said, why have 2 saris come to ashram? And he was told that they have been marked for Nagalakshmi. The saris have been marked for Nagalakshmi. Then that following morning, Bhagavan every day would go to the kitchen early in the morning. This was his way of showering grace on all those who were spending their entire time in the kitchen in order to be able to feed all the devotees who would be sitting in Bhagavan's presence in the hall, enjoying that presence, enjoying the meditation over there, sitting in his presence, listening to his speaking, answering questions, listening, seeing how he was interacting with all the beings who came in. It may be cow Lakshmi, it may be some monkey who came in from the window, peeped in from the window, or it may be the squirrels running all over his sofa, getting some nuts from him. All these people could see when they were sitting in the hall with him. But when it was 11 a.m., the bell would ring for lunch and all the devotees would go for lunch along with Bhagavan. How would lunch arrive over there unless lunch was prepared by someone? Those people would be at work from 3 a.m. in the kitchen to serve breakfast, to serve lunch, and then again to prepare dinner in the evening after a little bit of rest in the afternoon. And Bhagavan was with them in the kitchen. He was the first always. He would be there before the first of the workers. This was his great compassion on those workers, the kitchen workers as they are called. And of course, he gave them the best, the highest of the truth in the simplest of the actions which he did, or some of the events which happened in the kitchen. Now, Nagalakshmi was also there and he saw her the next morning and he said, Nagu, remember, and he said it a little sternly, Nagu, remember, whatever you may wish for is already with you. Whatever you may wish for is already with you. She said, Bhagavan, I never asked for it. I just said to a lady who had come, lady devotee, the sari you're wearing is very pretty. I only said that. And she has sent the saris. I did not say, please send me one. Bhagavan did not say anything. He said again, looking at her very, very sharply, very intently, he said, Nagu, remember, whatever you wish for is already with you. Now, this of course became a sort of a foundation for her spiritual growth from that moment onwards. But the point was, Bhagavan was trying to say, even when we find something, and when we exclaim, oh, that is so beautiful, somewhere in our heart, somewhere at the back of our minds, maybe the thought, that does not belong to me. So, in one sense, one who is abiding in the self, in which Bhagavan Ramana says, everything is contained. All the universes are contained in the self, says Bhagavan. Everything is in the self, including our own body. He says it's so strange. The body is in the self, and people think the self is in the body. Tanno tanu virka tana jadalan தன்னுள்ளிருப்பதா தானுன்னு மன்னவன். So Bhagavan says, it is so strange. So when you think that the self is within you, Atmadali dehavide ಎಂದು ಅರಿಯದೆಯೇ ದೇಹದಲ್ಲಿ ಆತ್ಮವಿದೆ ಎನ್ನುವ ನರನು ಚಿತ್ರ ಶೋಭಿಸುತ್ತಿರಲು ತೆರೆಯ ಮೇಲೆ ತೆರೆಯೋ ಚಿತ್ರದೊಳಿದೆ ಎನ್ನುವ ಪ್ರೇಕ್ಷಕನು ಆತ್ಮದಲ್ಲಿ ದೇಹವಿದೆ ಎಂದು ಅರಿಯದೆಯೇ ದೇಹದಲ್ಲಿ ಆತ್ಮವಿದೆ ಎನ್ನುವ ನರನು. Everything is contained in the self. If one abides in the self, then there is nothing outside to be desired. In fact, even to be thought about. Because thought is desire. What is thought? Says Bhagavan. Thought is the movement of the mind. Thought is vritti. The Sanskrit word used for thought is vritti. Vritti means movement. And movement has to be from one place to another. Movement implies going towards something or some place, moving towards a goal. That is movement. Movement is always towards some place. So a thought arises means there is a movement towards an object. Movement away from oneself towards an object. Why should we move towards an object? Obviously, because we desire it. We desire something from that experience. And that desire makes the mind move in the form of thought. And desire arises because of lack, because of emptiness, because one is not having what one desires or one imagines, one is not having what one desires. So the mind moves. So there is emptiness. There is a lack. And that lack is the sorrow with which we live. Our condition is in fact sorrowful, even if we do not countenance the different kinds of difficulties that we face day in and day out in our lives. Some of us may have relatively comfortable lives. Some of us may come to Bhagavan through sorrow. A great devotee, HMR, is one such instance. HMR, she lost her husband and she lost all her 3 children in quick succession, all within the period of a year. And she could not get over her grief. She could not, how could she get over her grief? She traveled in her pilgrimage throughout the country. She visited many, many sacred places. She served the sadhus in various places. She even got mantra diksha from one or two of these sadhus, and she tried to practice those sadhanas as well. But peace eluded her until she heard about Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi at Tiruvannamalai, and she came and she sat in the presence of Ramana in Virupaksha cave. He was then at Virupaksha cave, and when she sat in his presence, the floodgates of her sorrow just opened and tears poured from her eyes. They were pouring, pouring. She was just weeping, sitting in his presence, and he was simply looking at her until the entire sorrow was just washed away, and she was left filled with peace. It was all just washed away by that look of absolute love, absolute compassion, in which there is no other. Bhagavan was just being in the self which is the fullness of love. Bhagavan says, Anburu Arunachala Aran Meduga. Anburu Arunachala. He does not look at Arunachala, though he sings Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva. He says, Arunama Malayanum Ande. You have the name Arunachala, but what is your nature? Your nature is love. Preetiye Mayyada Arunagiriye. Preetiye Mayyada Arunagiri. Anpuru Arunachala. Arunamamalayanam Anbe. You are love. So that is the love. The self is love. And that love is what Bhagavan Ramana shares to heal our sorrow, to heal our condition. So this is an extreme sorrow of Echammal who lost all her dear ones. There is a sorrow of Ganapati Muni, the anguish of Ganapati Muni, the anguish of every spiritual seeker, but at its pinnacle, the anguish at its pinnacle. Many of us, whenever we are in any spiritual forum, whenever we meet with any spiritual person, a sadhu or a guru, the question which we often put to them is, my mind is refusing to become silent. It is turbulent. I sit in meditation, but I am not able to get into silence. What should I do? Right from the first, almost the first recorded speaker, one can say, Arjuna, Chanchalahi Mana Krishna. My mind is restless, O Krishna. Tasyaham nigraham manye vayoreva sudushkaram. I think I can control the wind, but not the mind, and it is disturbing me so much. For some of us, we need not have any sorrow to speak of, but the very movement of the mind is troubling us. It is sorrowful. We recognize that this movement of the mind itself is sorrow. That's why Bhagavan says, thought is sorrowful. Every thought is sorrowful. So Ganapati Muni, one who had done every possible kind of tapasya, who had done crores of Shiva Panchakshari japa within a month or so. Within a month or so, he had finished crores of Panchakshari japa. And he knew that he had not reached the fullness of his spiritual seeking. Look at the sorrow of that person. And he ran up to Bhagavan Ramana. One afternoon in November 18th, 1907, he ran up to Bhagavan, who was then at Virupaksha cave, but was seated somewhere outside. In the mid-afternoon, absolute scorching heat of Tiruvannamalai. He ran up and fell at his feet and poured out his anguish. He says, I washed his feet with my tears. I bathed his feet. I did abhisheka to his feet with my tears. Where am I going wrong? So sorrow, the sorrow of our condition. And Bhagavan spoke to him. He told him, find out from where the I arises and merge at its source. That is tapas. And the Muni could experience the answer. He could go to that source, which is the answer to also. Actually, Ramchandra Rao says very beautifully, further he says, he says over here, he says, again, he says over here, as I said, there are two approaches to Bhagavan Ramana, one as a teacher, the other as a healer. The healing aspect is most relevant to us now. The modern man wants to be healed. We have within us a great fund of dukkha. a great heaviness in our lives, disregardful of all the plenty that is surrounding us. Unlike the earlier years, those our forefathers lived in simple circumstances with far less material comforts than we enjoy today. But they seem to be relatively happy, and we seem to be much sadder than them. There is some kind of a burden on us, he says. There are systems of medicines which reach our body, which reach our mind, but there is hardly a system of medicine that can forge the link between the body and mind and establish a contact with the beyond. And it is this kind of healing that is required today. And Bhagavan Ramana provides this in abundant measure. This is the healing which we are seeking today. We want a healing perhaps for the body, and there are n number of wonderful hospitals around us. Our older systems of medicines are also now being rejuvenated. Ayurveda is being rejuvenated, Siddha is being rejuvenated. So many systems of medicines have come up, alternative healing. And there are enough number of people. If you go to the YouTube, you will find numberless courses teaching us how to get control over the mind, how to be a happy person, how to be a positive person, how to be a person who is liked by everyone around us, how to be a person who does not feel stress, how to be all this. We can get courses on that. But if we want to be rid of this problem called the mind, if we want to go to the beyond, if we find that the mind itself, even the best mind, is not good enough for us. As I said, Bhagavan says that thought is sorrowful, all thought is sorrowful. Why is the best mind not good enough for us? Of course, one point is that no matter how many joys we may have experienced in our lives, we may not be, maybe there are some of us, but by and large, we are not in a position to say, I am absolutely content. There is nothing that I seek. My cup is full and overflowing. Absolutely at rest. There is no sorrow and there is no fear. There is no anxiety. How many of us are in a position to say that? No matter how many joys may have come our way. I'm sure every one of us in this group, everyone in the world has experienced joy or pleasure from time to time. The proportion of experiencing sorrow and joy would vary from person to person. Swami Dayananda Saraswati, when we were young children, we would hear him giving his lectures. And he was also speaking at Ramanaketra, Delhi, on Bhagavan Ramana's 40 verses on reality Saddarshanam. In that context, he once or twice he would say, you know what is the condition of a human being? It is dukhi, 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 sukhi, dukhi, 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 sukhi, dukhi, dukhi. So it is always, it is dukkha, 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 dukkha. In between, some small little bit of sukha comes. And one gets carried away and wants to pursue that. Bhagavan Ramana says, it is like you are under the shade of a tree You can be always under the shade of the tree, cool breeze is blowing, the leaves are rustling, and there are some birds and all chirping in the tree. Maybe some little squirrels are running here and there. The flowers have bloomed on the tree and they're all fragrant flowers, and you're sitting under this tree. But you want to go out, away from the shade, and the scorching heat is there, and you run into the heat, and you are there, and you want to toil in the heat, you want to work in the heat, you want to sweat it out in the heat, and you get so tired and say, my God, let me rest a while under the shade. And you come back and sit down in the shade a little while. Then again you decide to go into the sun. Why do you need to do this? Why not just enjoy the shade? Always the shade of the self is available plentifully, 24/7, all the time, beyond the frontiers of time. In the realm of timelessness, it is available. Why don't you enjoy it? Why do you want to keep suffering in order to understand the beauty of this? So, one may feel that there is some suffering. At the point of time when there is suffering, when there is ill health, or when there is some dukkha, when there is some grief in the family, dear ones are suffering, oneself is suffering, or there is some mental turmoil, or some financial turmoil, or anything. When there is turmoil, it is very natural to seek the self. But what about when there is no turmoil? Should we understand that there is sorrow embedded in our condition even then? And that is the pain. That is the pain from which Ramana is giving us relief. Unless we see the sorrow that is embedded in our so-called pleasure, in our so-called apparent happiness, we will not in all sincerity seek the self. And if we do not in all sincerity seek the self, we may not experience the self. Because when we are seeking any object other than the self, our attention is naturally on that object. It is not on the self. When our attention is, when we are gazing outside the window, says Ramana, how can we experience what is there inside the room? And even if the windows are open, if we are not gazing outside, but if we are totally engaged in what is there within, how does it matter what is happening outside? So we have to understand what we are losing also. There are two ways in which we can understand that our condition is one of pain, because in every joy, there is the other side, there is the side of sorrow. It is like a coin. Joy and sorrow come hand in hand. How do they come hand in hand? Usually because of the temporal nature or the transient nature of every experience. So whenever we have one experience, whatever it is, even if it's a good experience, it will not last forever. It will get over at some point of time. So when it gets over, we feel sad. Whenever it gets over, we feel sad. We don't feel happy that it was there at some point of time. It's very, very, very rare. I often think, that when supposing there is a good relationship, two people have been very, very fond of each other, they've had a lovely time together. When one of these two passes away, the other feels so sad and moans and moans and moans. This other does not think, I have been so blessed in having this wonderful relationship. On the other hand, if two people have been fighting with each other, quarreling with each other all the time, if one for some reason leaves and goes away, it may be boss subordinate, it may be a life partner, it may be a parent, it may be a friend. When there is a break in that relationship, there is a sense of relief. So is it good to have a good bondage, or is it good to have a bad bondage, so that when it has to inevitably finish, one can feel relieved? Or is it good to have a good bondage? It does not leave us satisfied. We do not feel happy. We do not feel that, okay, I have enjoyed something for a long time. I have been so blessed. Yes, it's not there now, but I have been so blessed to have had it, to have seen it, to have enjoyed it. No, whenever something is taken away, we always feel sad. We always feel betrayed by, we often feel betrayed by God. Why did God do this to me? Why did God give me this difficulty? Very, very rare instance, and one of the very deep spiritual experiences in my life, when H.K. Narayana, who was a very famous singer in Karnataka, and he was a very close member of the Ramana Anjali, a dear member of the Ramana Anjali group, like a family member only. He and his family were had a fire accident in their own home. And in that fire accident, H.K. Narayana lost his 9-year-old son. And I went to his home to condole the loss of that son. How does one condole it? And Mrs. Narayana, always a very positive person. Kanta was her name. She was so sweet, and she initially did not even bring up the subject. She was speaking about the birth of Purna, which had happened just a few days before that. How was Ambika? And then slowly we took up the topic of the death of the child. And the first statement she made is, she said, for 9 years, God gave me this gift to enjoy. I am blessed. I am blessed that I had this wonderful gift for 9 years. Having first made that statement, then she wept, mother, she wept and she said, but still it is very difficult for me. Still it is very difficult. I miss the child. So the point is, even if you are able to accept that it was wonderful gift from God, when it goes away, and everything will go away, it is temporal. What comes must go. So it is temporal. One part is that sorrow is inevitable when some experience is there with an object, and if we see joy in an object, the ending of that situation is bound to bring sorrow. Sometimes when the situation is there itself, when it's available itself, we are in sorrow, worried about the loss. We are anxious that we may lose something. We are anxious that we may not get something. We are anxious. There is an underlying anxiety in our lives. There's underlying fear in our lives. What if it is not there? What if we are happy? Then also should we think that our situation is sorrowful? It is sorrowful in this sense. Supposing that somebody comes to me and says, okay, I can put 1 crore of rupees into your bank today. And the next moment he says, no, I think I will give you 1 rupee. Will that make me sad or not? Instead of 1 crore, I am only getting 1 rupee. Now that is what our situation is. We can have the limitless bliss of the self. And if something is standing in the way of our experiencing the limitless bliss of the self, is that something which is obstructing that limitless bliss? Is that something the cause of sorrow, or is it not? Is it not the cause of sorrow? Is not that obstruction the cause of sorrow? By one simple thought, we put away our own bliss. And have we ever been able to experience the supreme bliss through our thoughts? If we should have experienced bliss through thinking, all of us should be millionaires in bliss, because we are thinking all the time. There are thoughts, thoughts, thoughts. Last time when Ujjwal was speaking, he was saying thoughts, 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 thoughts. All the time there are thoughts. Bhagavan Ramana says, even in dreams, we have thoughts. In sleep also, our mind doesn't let us be. It produces thoughts in the dreams. So there are thoughts. All the time there are thoughts. And having so many thoughts, should we not be very, 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 very happy if our thoughts could give us joy? But they don't give us joy. On the other hand, they obstruct the experience of our true nature, which is bliss. And Ramana is that healer who says, who assures us, Ayye ati sulabham anma viddai. Atmajnana yenito sulabha yenu saralavo. Yenu saralavo. It is so simple. Self-knowledge is simple, my dear children. Very simple. You can get it. Why get it? It is yours already. In fact, even to have something in your palm, they give an example of a gooseberry in one's palm being very simple. That is a little distant from you compared to yourself. You need a palm, you need your eyesight, you need to have the gooseberry to recognize it is there. But all this is known to you because I am, because I am, I recognize thought. Because I am, I recognize the object. Because I am, I seek object through the thought. Everything springs from I am. It is available and it is fullness. It includes everything. One who abides in the self is emperor of all the universes. Emperor of the entire multiverse, as they call it now. Earlier they were calling it universe. Now there are multiverse. There are so many universes. Indraham puram இரு வினை இரல் ஜன்மம் இன்பு துன்பு எனும் கன இதயம் மன்றகம் அச்சலமா நடமிடும் அருணமலையெனும் எலையரும் அருணபூதரனே. So it is like you become, you don't have any of the pain of duality, which springs from identity. The moment one limits oneself to a name and form, I am this, then everything that is not this becomes outside of me. It becomes the other. And Baniji beautifully would tell us that even my own mind, in my own mind, at every moment there is this and there is that. There is this which says, now you pay attention to this. This is most important. And there is that part of my mind which says, why not now pay attention? Now, why not look at the cricket match which is going on? Why not listen to some other song? Why not eat this tasty dish, although it may add to the sugar levels in my body? Why not? So there is constantly two people within us. And when there are two, there is conflict and there is pain and there is suffering. How to get back? Ramana says, when you find your true nature, in the simple path of self-inquiry, you can get back to your true nature. Using the simple means of self-inquiry, you would have crossed over then the disease, which is this body. The body is just a disease. Everyone says it's a disease. Body itself is a disease. It's not that it has to have any further disease. A great Carnatic music composer is Chedi Kshininche Dehamo stiramani yetu nammina. O manasa yetu nammina. How do you believe this body is permanent? This body is good. It's just a bag of disease. Chedi ksheedinche. It keeps on getting worse. It also decays. How can you think it is permanent? How can you think it is? Hello? Vani, are you trying to say something? Vasu? Hello? Are you hearing me?
Sharda, we can hear you. No, we are not trying to say anything. Please continue.
No, there is something, there is some disturbance which is coming in.
I'll just check what's happening.
I didn't know. I thought somebody was trying to say something.
No, you continue. I'll check what's happening.
Okay. So this body which is decaying, this body we think is I, this body first of all, and then all the pains and the sorrows which come with the body.
Hello.
Hello? All the pains and difficulties which come with the body, they become our difficulties, they become our pain, they become our sorrow. Then there is the mind. The mind also gives us ample number of difficulties. As we said, first of all, it has anxieties, it has emotions, it has anger, it has grief, it has jealousy, it has negative emotions, it has positive emotions. It may lead us to do wrong things, it may make us feel guilty. We may be carrying a load of guilt. You know, one of my favorite stories, incidents in the life of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi is the load of guilt that sometimes we carry. Every time actually, anyone tells us you have done this, you have not done this, we have our bristles up. We feel bad or we feel angry. I wanted to do this. I wanted to do this before she told me you have not done this. I've actually tried my best and she is blaming me. What can I do? This is how the situation is, isn't it? We don't want to be blamed. And that is sometimes if we are justifying ourselves. Otherwise, sometimes it may be that we really feel we have done something wrong. We might have made mistakes. Who is it who is there in this world who would not have made one or two mistakes or more mistakes? And some of us feel very sad about the mistakes we have made. There was one person who felt maybe he had led not a very good life. And at one juncture, he felt, oh my God, I am such a great sinner. I am such a great sinner. And he came to Bhagavan Ramana and he said, Bhagavan, you save me. Because there is no other recourse for me. I am such a great sinner. I have done everything wrong in my life. And Bhagavan, it seems, this incident is recorded by Krishna Bhikshu. They were all sitting outside around the well in Bhagavan's presence. And this man had come, evening in Arunachala, the silence of the hill. We can imagine, even now, we can feel the silence of Arunachala. In those days, the silence must have been very physical. The ashram president often says, even when he was young, that is not so many years ago as in Bhagavan's physical presence, there used to be so much silence in the ashram. There is still silence. There is always silence in Bhagavan's presence. We feel it even in the shrine, right amidst the traffic rushing towards Makeri Circle, there is silence. But there was very palpable physical silence. Few people seated around Bhagavan, and this man, he started weeping and told Bhagavan, I am a great sinner. Please save me. And Bhagavan looked at him intently. That was always his way. Ganapati Muni, even when he records the question answers in Ramana Gita, after every question, he will say, Bhagavan was silent for a while. And he bathed the questioner with his glance. Abhishikya Katakshena. With his Kataksha, he did Abhisheka to the one asking the question. And then he answered. So he looked at the questioner and then he said, all right, if I must save you, if I must take away the load of sins that you are carrying, what Guru Dakshina will you give me? Everyone else was stunned. Because first of all, Bhagavan does not say he's a Guru. And he never ever asks for any Dakshina or asks for anything whatsoever under the sun. And here he is asking this person, what Guru Dakshina will you give me? And the man was also a little stunned, but he said, Bhagavan, whatever you ask for, if it is within my capacity to give it to you, I will give. I will willingly give it to you. Then Bhagavan said, all right. In that case, give me the fruits of all your good deeds, of all your merits, of all your punya. Give me, hand over to me the fruits of all your merits. The man started laughing. He said, Bhagavan, what are you asking for? I have no merits. I have not done nothing good in my life. Not a single act of goodness have I done. That is my pitiful condition. You see, the extreme sorrow of HMR, the extreme sorrow, the extreme agony of a Ganapati Muni, who recognizes that every human endeavor cannot make us reach the truth, or the extreme anguish of a person who recognizes there's nothing in me, there's absolutely no meaning in me. Because if I have some meaning in me, if I have some pride, some unknown arrogance about my existence, it will help me to hold on to the identity. But here is a person who recognizes the absolute futility of his identity. And he is telling Bhagavan, I have done nothing good. I have done nothing good. Bhagavan said, okay, looks like you don't want to give me the fruits of your good acts. That's why you are making all these excuses. And he said, no, Bhagavan, not at all like that. Then he thought for a moment and he said, okay, if by chance, unknowingly, if I have done something good in my life, and if there is any fruit that has accrued to me for that good act, with all joy, I offer all that to you, Bhagavan. I offer all that to you. Then Bhagavan said, okay, that's good, but that's not enough. Now, you give me the fruits of all your bad deeds. And this man began to shiver. He began to tremble. He said, Bhagavan, I am a horrible sinner. But how much more horrible a sinner I would be if I were to put on to you the deed, the fruits of the deeds which I have done. You cannot imagine the kind of karma that will accrue, the kind of pain that should accrue, what I should suffer. It is with that fear that I have come to you. How can I give that to you? How can I give you that? How can I cast that horrible burden upon you? Then Bhagavan seems very beautifully, Krishna Bhikshu describes. See, Bhagavan who is looking at him, then he would sit back. Okay, so if you're not giving me the Guru Dakshina, then don't call me a Guru. Then don't say I should solve your problem. And this man would say, no, Bhagavan, please don't cast me away like that. Dura madabeda Ramana Ninnai dasana. Don't cast me away. Then Bhagavan said, okay, give me what I'm asking for. And he said this bargaining was happening for some time. This man would say, no, it's not possible. And Bhagavan would say, if it is not possible, then I am not solving your problem. And finally, that man, how much he must have felt burdened, and with a lot of anguish, he said, Bhagavan, I give you the fruits of all my bad deeds. And Bhagavan looked at him with a lot of love. He said, now there is no good in you. There is no bad in you. You are as you are. You are as you are. Just be that. So the great burden that we are carrying, the great burden of all the bad, and the equally great burden of all the good that we are carrying, the master healer says, lay it down. Lay it down. If you have had enough, if you have had enough of carrying this burden on your head, of carrying this burden on your shoulders, lay it down. How do you lay down this burden? Recognize the burden. Recognize that you are carrying this burden. What is this burden? See, normally we say this burden we are carrying on our head, no? Actually, inside our head, we are carrying this burden. This burden is thoughts. Huge burden. Every thought says, I need to do. I want to do. I can do. I cannot do. Oh, I can do. How will I do? How will I do this? I cannot do this. How can I do this? Either it's moving towards action, or else the thought says, let me experience this. I want to experience joy. I want to experience wonder. Or the thought says, I know this. I know this is anger. I know this is sorrow. And it is sitting there all the time, analyzing, discriminating, saying, I know. And is holding on to the burden of having to know. And how long can it know? Until if it is blessed, if this brain is not struck with any disease, then one can know. Then one can discriminate. A small physical disease, physical knock on the head itself can change the entire story. So, this is the burden we are carrying. We think that without thought, we cannot exist. But Bhagavan says, he gives us the beautiful medicine. He says, thinking is not your nature. Thinking is not your nature. Thought rises, thought subsides. Consciously recognize thought is a burden. Thought is sorrow. because it leads me away from the self towards my identity. And this identity is nothing but sorrow because it is limited. When it is limited, it is always in conflict with the world outside in some way or the other. And it is bound to be sad, it is bound to be anxious. So I have the freedom to lay down this burden. The medicine says, Ramana, is when thought arises, even as it rises, even as a thought rises, don't wait for it to even take shape, become this, and then say, I want to do this XYZ. Why should I do this? Why should I not do this? Don't even try to wait till the analysis point. Even as it rises, even as you become aware of a thought rising, at that point, turn back, ask, for whom is this thought? For whom is this thought? Is the thought I? No, it is not I. It is my thought. No thought is I. Thoughts are not I. They come and go, but I am there. Thoughts are not I. Then, when a thought arises, ask, for whom is this thought? Watch. You will realize thought has come. And thought has come means it was not there the previous moment, right? It is arisen. So it's not I. It's arisen. And it will disappear also. So it's not I. Whose is it? For whom is it? It is for me. It is my thought. This answer, this question and this answer by Bhagavan are great medicines. Why? Because first, they make us aware of the fact. They make us hold responsibility for our thinking. Otherwise, what do? We very often believe that thoughts are coming in from somewhere, like people coming into our room all of a sudden. I may be sitting and speaking, suddenly somebody opens my door if I have not locked it. Somebody might start talking to me, somebody might do something in this room, make noise. People can barge into any place, right? In a democracy, that's even more possible. So we often try to think that we don't have control. The thoughts come and they go. If we really don't have any control over thoughts, we can't even tell our children, pay attention to this lesson of yours, don't get distracted. How can we tell them poor things? They are not in control. How can we tell our mind, focus on the Ishtadevata, focus on your work, focus on meditation, focus on the self, focus on the inquiry? How can we tell if thoughts are not under our control? It's because Bhagavan Ramana says thought arises only when you pay attention to the object. It arises only when you pay attention to the object. It is your thought. Accept responsibility for it. And when you accept responsibility for it, you will also have the freedom from it. If I do not pay attention to that object, if I ask myself instead, who am I? If I turn the attention back to the I, instead of keeping it on the object, the thought will disappear. I will be free of the thought. See, the greatest joy, the greatest sorrow is bondage. And we are bound. We are bound by our body. We are bound by our emotions. We are bound by our thoughts. We are bound by our beliefs. We are bound by our fears. We are bound. And the medicine is freedom from all this by going to the root bondage, the root identity, by cutting away the root identity. So when we ask, for whom is this thought? Answer comes, it is for me. And I realize it is my thought. So I can desist from paying attention to it. It's not somebody else's thought. It's mine. So I need not pay attention to it. I can turn my attention away from it. I can drop it. I have the complete freedom to drop it, to drop any thought right now, right here, to be free from thoughts. I have that complete power. This is the medicine, the rare medicine which Bhagavan gives to us. Bhavadasegala suduva Srikalpataru. This is he is a giver of, he is the Kalpataru, says Sadhu Swami. That wish fulfilling tree which cuts away the desires. Okay. So he says, turn back, turn back. Every time a thought arises, don't be burdened by that sorrow. Turn back, ask for whom is this thought. The answer will come. The thought is for me. Ask, who am I? And you will rest in the source of your own being. You will rest in your own being with that question. Because when we ask, who am I? When we really ask, who am I? Can there be any answer? If we have an answer, we shouldn't be asking, who am I? If I say I am the body, then I shouldn't be asking, who am I? If I say I am not the body, even then I have some answer, right? Now, why should I ask when I have an answer? When I'm really asking, there is absolute non-knowing. There is absolute tentativeness. Ganapati Muni says it is like running backwards. It's like running backwards. If we run backwards, if we run forward, we can judge. Okay, there is a dip here, there is a rise there is some obstacle coming in our path. We must shift to the right, we must shift to the left. And our own action, our own planning has a large role to play. But what about when we are running backwards without any rear view mirror, unlike in a car? When we are running backwards, what happens? We don't know. So we have to be 100% alert. If we are running backwards, we have to be 100% alert. We can't be the least bit distracted. Every step of ours, we have to be alert to the ground, we have to be alert to the sounds, we have to be alert and tentative. There is alertness and there is not knowing, not judging, not expecting anything. That is how we turn back and ask, who am I? Without expecting anything, without expecting any answer, any experience, but remaining alert to whatever is going to be revealed. Just remaining alert. Without allowing the mind to move forward again in the form of thought. Just remaining alert and moving back. Just back to the self. Back to the self. So, yes. So there is, this is the burden. Now, a question has come up saying, I thought some thoughts help us to realize the self. There are some positive thoughts. There are some thoughts which are supports to the inquiry. The whole thing is actually to let go. Now, those thoughts which help us to let go may be considered, which prepare us to let go. If we are not ready to let go, what to do? There's a child who is not ready to get into the water to swim. Then we tell the child, okay, you wear this float and you get into the water, you won't sink. So the child gets a little over the fear of the water. The child gets used to the water. The child feels comfortable. But you can't be swimming with a float around your waist all the time, right? You have to remove the float at some point of time. You can use it as a support. But one has to let go of every single thought if one has to experience the self. One may use some thoughts to prepare oneself to the fact that one has to let go. Swami Virajananda used to give a very beautiful example. He would say that it's like doing pole vaulting. the pole vaulting, you might have seen it in Olympics or in other sports events. It's a kind of a high jump where the jumper, the vaulter, uses a pole. That pole is flexible. It's a pole is flexible, and it may be 5 feet, 6 feet tall, depending on the expertise of the vaulter. And the vaulter, what he does is, using the pole, he runs, then goes to the top of the pole and jumps to the other side. So he can reach far greater heights than he can do in a personal high jump. So that is pole vaulting. Now, Swami Virajananda would say, supposing the pole vaulter, as he is about to jump to the other side, thinks, oh, this pole has been so helpful to me. It has allowed me to reach such a big height. Without the help of this pole, I could never have come anywhere to this height. Can I leave this pole behind and go? What will happen? He will fall on the same side. If he tries to carry the pole, neither will he cross, nor will the pole cross. There will be no use at all. What all the pole had helped him to do would have been in vain. So, if there are good thoughts which are helping our mind to become pure, what does a pure mind mean? A pure mind is that mind in which there are less and less and less of thoughts. Because the self alone is pure. Thoughts are all impure. Anything you add to milk is impurity. If you add water, can we say we can add pure water, therefore the milk remains pure? If you add impure water, the milk becomes impure? No. If you add water to the milk becomes diluted, the milk becomes impure. That which is not the self, initially in our search, we say this is not the self, that is not the self. The body is not the self. Vigraha, Indriya, Prana, Dhi, Tamaha, Naham, Ekasat. Naham Ekasat, Bhagavan tells us. Then later he will say, once you have recognized the self, it is all inclusive. There is nothing apart from it. But initially, I think I am the body, then body is not I. I think I am the prana, prana is not I. I think I am the manas, emotions are not I. I think I am the buddhi, thoughts are not I. When they are not I, if they arise, that is an impurity in our experiencing of the self. How can the impure help us to experience the pure? And how does self-inquiry, which is a thought, help us to experience the truth? Bhagavan says, because the question, who am I? Even though it is a thought, it cuts away all the other thoughts and ultimately it gets consumed. The question, who am I, also gets consumed. That also will arise. Who's asking this question, who am I? And one will get back into silence, into the pure nature of the self. So, no thought is the self. Therefore, Bhagavan says every thought is sorrow. And if one holds on to any thought, one is holding on to limitation. One is holding on to sorrow. And that is the reason why Bhagavan says he gives us the medicine of dropping, cutting across all thoughts, even the so-called good thoughts, because thinking is not our nature. We do not need thoughts to survive. We do not need thoughts to survive physically. We do not need thoughts for performing any of our functions. Meaning to say, thought as I understand it now. For us, thought is my thought. My thought is not needed for anything. Automatically from the self, pure radiation, pure intuition will arise. In the case of a person abiding the self, a pure intuition will arise and guide them to do whatever needs to be done. Thought as we define it is just a movement of a mind towards the object. For one abiding in the self, there is no object. Therefore, it is said that such a one has no mind or no thoughts. So, thoughts are not needed. In the Ramana way, Bhagavan says thoughts are not necessary. They are sorrowful because they are obstacles to your experience truth. Now, we may add one point. Is the self absent when there are thoughts? That is impossible. The self is always there. The knowledge of the self is also there. It is obscured by thoughts. Why do we need to get to a thought-free state when the self is available even when thoughts are there? Just to understand that we are not dependent on thoughts. We are not puny little beings dependent on the body, dependent on thoughts to sustain the body. We are not these puny little beings. We are the immensity of the self. To rid ourselves of this notion that we are puny beings, we have to get to a point where we are ready to dissolve this puny being in the self. How can we dissolve this puny being in the self? This being will not commit suicide. So ask, who am I? It will automatically dissolve. Drop the thought. It will automatically take attention back to the I. Drop the I through the questioning and it will dissolve. As Bhagavan says in a beautiful Hindi translation of Bhagavan's work, he says, Sagar mein galti shakkar ki गुड़िया प्यारी प्यारी आया शरण तुम्हारी। ओम नमो भगवते श्री